We'd like to welcome you to the Heart Leader Podcast, where heart and mind align. I'm your host, Amber, and I'm here with co-host Austin, and we'd like to know, do you have a passion to make a greater global impact? Are you ready to embrace leading with heart and love? If so, join us on this journey to become heart leaders who change the world. Each episode brings heart-centered connection, building stronger relationships, communities, and businesses. Let's take a deeper dive into what it means to be heart leaders. The Heart Leader Podcast starts now. Hi, and welcome to the Heart Leader Podcast, where heart and mind align. I am your host, Amber, and today I have the honor of being joined by Stephan Strauss. Stephan is an amazing heart leader who comes to us all the way from Germany. He has dedicated his life and his career to turning businesses around from a very heart-centered place. He has come up through corporations and fundamentally found a way to see people and understand how to utilize that human potential in a way that it can actually benefit both the person and the organization. He has over 30 years and a global track record of just turning around, transforming and innovating growth services and technology and service-based businesses. And just to make sure I don't misquote any of the amazing things that this man has done, I'm going to take a moment to just read a little bit from this bio that he has sent us, but you can find all of it on the website and underneath of this podcast, because Stephan has founded and is the CEO of a transformation advisory firm called Smart Planet Ventures. In this, he advises CEOs, entrepreneurs, investors, as well as corporations and startups and NGOs worldwide on how to take what he has learned through his own experience and through studies and how to turn around organizations and really reach people to help find the best within them. He has a passion to build a more sustainable, inclusive, and diverse economy by integrating positive impacts on people, the planet, and how to pull prosperity out of that. So when you have someone like this who's agreed to come on to your show and talk, we want to take more of the time to listen. So I want to bring him on right now so we can start to really hear his wisdom. So Stephan, thank you for being here. I know it's late where you are, so I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Amber, for your most kind and generous introduction. And thanks very much for having me.
Well, I want to start by really understanding when we're talking about reaching into like human potential, right? And what human potential can do for a business or an organization, especially as a CEO, and what you've done in your career as a CEO and going in and helping organizations. What does that mean? What does that look like from a CEO standpoint? Because I know sometimes CEOs can get a really bad rap from those who are not at that level or even in the executive level. So when you have someone who does come in and see the human potential and desire to reach out to staff, what does that look like from that level? I know it's a hard question.
It's a very big question. And I try to dive into that a little bit with telling you what I've found when I was mandated with a turnaround situation, a transformation situation. So over the last 15 years of my career, I was mostly tasked with dealing with situations as a CEO where A company was loss-making, underperforming, and I came to realize in all of those cases that the root cause for that malperformance again and again was culture. And culture is an effect of leadership. So the leadership style practiced before I came in was pretty much consistently, it was always command and control and threat and fear based. And that in combination with highly organized, highly siloed organizations created an environment where organizations were not able to perform on any level. And this typically finds its expression in dysfunctional behavior that you would find in an organization, like absence of trust, fear of conflict, for example. You get this defensive behavior, this cover my butt behavior, a lack of commitment, high stress levels that you would see in ill health, high rates of absenteeism, up to inner resignation of people that you would encounter. You would find avoidance of accountability, this typical finger pointing phenomenon. Yeah, it was him, not me.
Oh yeah, us versus them, right?
Yes, exactly. Inattention to results up to the point of utter sabotage. So these are typical effects of that kind of leadership behavior. Yeah. So threat and fear-based leadership systems create cultures where people who are good people originally, I think everyone is good and joyful and loving, but people get driven into a kind of behavior that is dysfunctional in these kind of situations. So this was always pretty much the root cause of unclear strategic direction, lack of collaboration, lack of creativity and innovation, bad execution, and leading those companies into even into distress, right? And Peter Drucker, the famous economist, once said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And this is what I have encountered again and again. So you can have the greatest strategy, you can have the greatest technology. In the end, it's people who make it happen. In the end, it's people who develop a technology. In the end, it's people who develop a strategy and execute on it. And if that doesn't happen, if people don't have the room, the space to feel safe and trusted, you will lose people's engagement. So the bottom line of that is a good culture is the strongest competitive advantage that you can have as a business. A bad culture is a competitive business risk, very clearly. So any sensible investor into a company, might it be startup or mature, will always place 50% at least of their attention into assessing leadership, team, and culture. And as a CEO, as you just mentioned it, there are three key tasks, key focus points that you have. It's people, culture, and strategy, right? And in that order. The key to a strong culture then is trust and safety. When people feel safe and trusted, it opens up space and it drives people engagement. It drives energy, it drives commitment, it boosts well-being, and it drives creativity and innovation. And as a result, an organization is successful and performs well and has a competitive advantage. So what I did when I came into such organizations, I never focused on the numbers. I always focused on people and on building and developing and nurturing environments of trust and the numbers in terms of financial performance came as a result of that. So that was my approach that always led me to be successful.
So people were your investment.
Yes, most definitely. Yes.
How did organizations respond when you would come in and flip the script like that? I mean, that's not a normal, at least in my experience here, that was never necessarily readily received when you would walk in and say, well, I understand the financials are our focus right now, but why don't we change that and make people the focus and then let financial reward be the outcome of the investment in the people? Because it wasn't always an immediate return on that investment, and we were looking at the short game, not the long game, it wasn't always necessarily like, yes, let's do that. Let's just make that investment right now. Then it wasn't received the way that one would anticipate because we weren't looking at the long game. So how did you bridge that gap? How did you communicate to those that you were walking into and being in service with and of that, hey, this is going to pay multiple in the long run. We might have to take a short hit, but in the long run, this is really going to get us where we want to go.
Yeah, well, as you say, this is a journey that you embark on, and you have to be aware of that. This is not a quick fix, and people who have been led in a threat and fear-based system, command and control, they will not immediately trust, and it takes a while for you to role model the kind of behavior to share very openly what this is all about, and to involve people, engage people in a way that builds actually trust. So I always find that this kind of journey is like an expedition into uncharted territory, where you go up a mountain and you form the team, and you need to make sure that everyone knows and understands where you are and where you want to go. And then you have to make sure that everyone is able to come along, is able to contribute, is safe, and understands how we are progressing, right? And it starts with sharing very openly, coming back to the business environment where you are. In all of those situations that I came in, people had not been told the truth. They didn't know in what a dangerous, disastrous, money-losing situation the business was. So this was the first order of the day, basically, sharing again and again the truth, very authentically, very openly, very honestly, and obviously then to provide a vision of where we need to go. And then it starts with the joint work. It's nothing that can be enforced top down, but it's a collaborative act. And I would call this, it's a kind of joint why, how, and what work. So first of all, you need to start involving people right from the start, and it starts with jointly developing or reviewing what is our North Star, what is our purpose, why are we around, and why should we be around for much longer? I mean, what's the reason for that? What kind of value do we create and provide to our customers, but also to our other stakeholders, to our community? And what are the values that are guiding us? So this is something that needs to be built and developed together right from the start. The second one, the second step is pretty much around how do we want to work? You know, what are our guardrails? How do we want to structure our cooperation and our communication? What is our culture supposed to look like? And the third step, the what work, is then really about meeting people where they are and who they are, and enabling everyone to show up wholly as a human being. And you just mentioned it, Amber. I always perceive people like clouds, and in highly overstructured companies or highly siloed companies, those clouds are then being forced into a chest of drawers. So what you get actually, you get a stamp out of a whole personality, but the whole personality gets reduced to a little box that is supposed to fulfill a certain function or play a certain role. And this is nothing that I ever believed in. So the question is, how do you enable people to show up wholly? How do you also take approaches to designing an organization that allows for people to show up wholly, and not to check in the morning at the reception desk at 9 o'clock and leave the half or even more of their humanity behind and check out again and pick it up when they go home? This is nothing that would work. So this is what I mean about showing wholly. People need to have the opportunity to bring their whole humanity to work, which also means they bring their whole potential to work. And one of the basic attitudes that are important to me here, and I've always looked for that kind of attitude when I hired people into leading positions, is you need to have an attitude of people are not who or what they are, but what they can be. Because when you take people who they are, you make them dull, you restrict them, you constrain them, you contain them to a snapshot that they might be at the moment. But if you alleviate people, if you make them more of what they are today, if you open that room, you open the space for development, you open the space for unfolding potential. And this is what I think one of the key tasks of any leader needs to be. You need to approach people and meet people based on that kind of attitude. And with that in mind, I always hired for key leadership positions. I always hired by attitude over competence. So this kind of attitude is way more important than a certain functional competence that somebody might need. Might it be someone in finance? Might it be someone in operations? Because that can be learned. Yeah, you can also structure teams in ways that they balance their strengths and weaknesses. But this kind of attitude is game changing and is really the basis for any kind of success.
Amazing. So it sounds like there's so many different components that you would go in and look at, knowing that it wasn't time bound, but you were building a team that had an open view of, all right, it isn't only about skill set. It is also about looking at the whole potential of a person and everything about their life. It is also about me and my potential and everything about my life.
Yeah.
And integrating as a team and knowing the mission, the vision, the values of the organization, and what that contributes to the community and to the world. So it's a whole integrative process within the person, within the organization, within the city, within the planet. Like, it just goes in and out. It's like a breathing organism.
Yes.
All the way around.
Yeah. Right.
What led you to that? Because I would not say that that's the most common view. It's not never happening, but I have not run into many who view an organization as a living organism in that type of a way. What led you to that? How did you get to this space in your own perspective?
Having seen what it does to organizations and people if you don't do it that way, having experienced this kind of threat and fear-based and command and control-based systems, and having met so many people in those organizations who have been reduced to a particle, a fragment of who they are, and it's something that creates suffering for individuals. It creates stress. It up to stress-induced illnesses that go rampant in these kind of organizations. And you get the kind of behavior that I just alluded to, dysfunctional behavior, where people do things, good people do bad things all of a sudden. Non-compliance behavior with laws and regulations, doing all kinds of things in order to make up for something that is expected of them, which is then executed in a way that isn't based in enabling people, but putting pressure on them. And then people try to find ways in order to keep their job and do what is expected of them. But they move sometimes into areas which are illegitimate or worst case illegal, and you get these kind of behaviors that we've seen over the last few years and decades in many companies. Might it be something like Dieselgate? Might it be some kind of collusion? Might it be antitrust behavior in terms of agreeing pricings across competitive companies? All these kind of things are typical symptoms of people having been pressured in organizations, and instead of opening the spaces for creativity and innovation, they were reduced to something and not giving the opportunity to do what they could do, right?
Yeah. So
And this is something that I've experienced many times, and it's the individual and the organizational suffering that actually then I for some reason was always quite sensitive to, and it drove me to the conclusion there needs to be a different approach. There needs to be a more humane and human-centric approach to leading that. And I started trying out that in my early leadership functions, and found that it worked better than anything else, and it was authentic to myself. Then I developed my own approach over time, and grew with the growing mandates that I got.
Can you talk to us about your approach?
I'm sorry?
Can you talk to us about your own approach? I believe it's rolled into a new flow that we've seen called the Heartful Leadership. Is it the one and the same, or is it a separate approach?
No, it's basically that, and it's basically something that has three tiers, I would say, 3 levels, and it always starts with oneself. So the first part of that is recognizing your own suffering, being aware of your own suffering and your own humanity, of your own faults, of your own traumas, and starting to work on that. We all have our own traumas and our own journeys that have brought us to who we are today. And being aware of what am I carrying around that is, or that has set me off in a certain direction or a trajectory, is probably the first step. And the second step then is starting to manage these basic functionalities, body, mind, heart, and soul, in order to come to in order to progress, to become a better version of myself. So this is the first, and I think probably the most important step. If you want to change something, then you need to start with yourself. The second step then is, if you have the awareness for your own humanity, then obviously you have to develop an awareness for other people's humanity. You're no better than anyone else. So other people's suffering and vulnerability is just the same. And you, from that point of view, the moment that you dive into that process of managing your basic functionalities, or your basic faculties, the better word, you start to develop compassion, empathy for what other people are going through. So based on a better way of managing your own and leading your own self, you can then progress into leading others with questions like how to connect and build trusting environments, how to create connection and belonging, and based on that, there comes then a third level where you actually take the self-management leadership and the capability of leading others, and then apply it to those positive changes that you want to see in the world. So it's these three things: self-management, leadership, leading others, and leading change and transformation, that constitutes my approach and that has evolved over time, and that I would say is now something that I try to pass on to others.
It's when I looked through it, you kindly shared it so we could take a look through it, and there are so many components, because in that me part, the reviewing of the me, not only do you see growth opportunities, but you also have the opportunity to really embrace your strengths, which oftentimes we can overlook in that self-deprecation process that many of us tend to do, because that negative brain bias, because we all have that so often, and we can talk ourselves down. But when we get to know ourselves, not only are we finding our growth opportunities, but we also have that opportunity to find our strengths and what we bring to the table, right?
Yeah.
And so from what you were saying previously, where you're building that team and you're finding, okay, when I know the strengths of everyone on my team, then I can align everyone into the place where I empower them to draw out their strengths. And as they get to know even more about their strengths, then we can move them around. It isn't like you set them and that's the only place they are. An organization is a moving thing. And so there's growth opportunity. As the person grows, the organization grows and people can move around. And so as we've talked prior to this, there's always that mobility within the we as the me grows. And so that strategy that you're discussing, the me to the we, when we get into that community part of it, whether it's an organization or outside, then you can move around as you grow stronger and get to know yourself more. And then the community gets stronger through that as you integrate.
Right.
And so that's a beautiful part of this model is it's ever growing, ever changing. As you grow, we grow. As we grow, then we contribute more to the planet or the whole. And the evolution of that is infinite. It's amazing.
Right. And obviously, strengths is only one side of the coin. It's also about the weaknesses that every one of us has as much as we have strengths. And I think it's as important to pay attention to those weaknesses because they are based on something, mostly things that we experienced in our formative years between birth and 2 years of birth and the first 6 years of our lives. So instead of looking at a person and saying, hey, what's wrong with him or wrong with her, we should ask the question, what happened to him or what happened to her? Because when we do that, we don't approach the other human being judgmentally, but with compassion and empathy. There must have been some event that shaped that person in a certain way. And helping to recognize that and also helping with developing out of that, dealing with that, first of all, and then finding ways to also deal with the weaknesses is as important, in my experience, as looking at the strengths. And this is another extremely important task of a heart leader, I would say.
That's incredible. Yes, that removing of judgment, because we all love to categorize, right? Let's put you in this box here and set you over here with everyone else who goes in that box instead of, no, we don't need to label you or put you in a box.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's extremely, and here again, I think one of those major leadership traits is that as a leader of a team or of an organization, you need to be aware of the fact that you're no better than anyone else. It's you share a common humanity. You share the same basis of strengths and weaknesses, of traumas and of positive things that have come your way and that have shaped you as much as someone else. And I think this is so extremely important when it comes to leading. It has to do with authenticity. It has to do with humility. It has to do with collaboration on eye level. So it has to do with so much with gratitude and awareness. So these kind of things are absolutely key to developing the ability to inspire others, to help others. Along with that, with an ethos of serving others. And I think this is a way of leadership that can be extremely effective. And I feel that we need that nowadays and in the next future more than ever. Why? Because the world around us is becoming such an unpredictable unreality that the only way to really deal with it is to figure it out, not to find it out. And in order to figure it out, we have to fall back onto an inner compass. So Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, recently said in an inauguration speech, those of us who want to lead in the future need to do that from an inner compass. That's the inner compass that I talk about. Yeah, it's our heart. It's our heart-based leadership of ourselves, leadership of others, and then translating that in dealing with the challenges of creating the positive changes that we need to see in this world.
From that space, I know our focus this month is all around communication, right? When we're coming from that heart-centered space, that heart-based space, and we're navigating conflict, because it will happen.
Yeah.
And many people shy away from conflict, right?
Right.
It's not something that's easy to address.
Yeah.
What advice might you offer someone to navigate through conflict in that heart-centered way, but still come at it from that authentic, okay, let's just navigate this, not shy from it or not go too aggressively at it? I mean, there are so many different things we can do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it starts with the simple fact that accepting conflict as a part of life, right? So, conflict is nothing extraordinary. And there's something like the magic ratio in healthy relationships. So every healthy relationship has, on average, one conflict-laden interaction for every 5 positive interactions. Yeah, that's a rough rule of thumb. So you need to accept it as a fact of life to begin with. And then don't suppress conflict, but handle it constructively. And that's extremely important in business, because every unaddressed conflict at work has the potential to waste many hours in gossip and unproductive behavior. So it's really important to deal with it, and to deal with it constructively. And there are a few principles to deal with that. So one is responsibility. You need to take responsibility, and it's 100% your responsibility to stay centered and connected and keep the other party centered and connected. So this is one principle. A second one is intention. Maintain a positive intention all throughout. So bring your heart into the conflict. A third one is, and I think that's even more important, it's non-attachment. Don't be attached to any specific outcome or any specific path this conflict resolution is supposed to take, but be open to what unfolds. Another one is unconditional respect. So no matter how upsetting a behavior you might encounter, always show unconditional respect, not only towards the other party, as much as to yourself, right?
Yeah.
And the last point I would say is full engagement. So be fully present, be fully attentive to the situation, its nuances, its thoughts, feelings, needs, again, in a mutual way, your parties as much as your own. So I think those are 5 key principles for dealing with conflicts. And a very important question then is, how do you communicate in a conflict situations? Very often, emotion gets mixed up with facts, and you get very quickly offensive or defensive behavior. And this is mostly very detrimental to reaching constructive outcomes.
Exactly.
And one method
everyone gets triggered.
Yes, exactly. I mean, everyone encounters that every day, maybe. You never listen when I talk, for example. Well, if there's an immediate attack on the other person in a factual thing that you would like to share, right? And there's a method that's called nonviolent communication. it was developed by Marshall B. Rosenberg, a psychologist, which is nothing new, but it's basically a combination, a compilation of a lot of things that we knew for a long time, but it's very, very effective. And it's 4 levels that you, or 4 steps in a communication process that you follow. One is observation. So share an observation of the fact, what is actually on the table. And I give you an example right away. The second one is share the information. How does it make you feel, right? The third thing is clearly formulate a need. What do you need in order to change your emotional state to a different one, a more positive one? And then there's a request to the other party to take a certain action in order to do that, right? So if you take a situation, for example, again, a business situation, yeah? Instead of saying, you often don't listen to me when I'm speaking, right? You can say, in our meeting today, I noticed that you were on the phone while I was presenting, while I was speaking, right? That's the observation. The second thing is the emotion. It brings up in me the emotion of not being valued for what I have to say, right? That's how you might feel in that situation. Third, I need to know that I have my partner's attention when I'm speaking, right? So you're clearly expressing a need. And then you're expressing a request to the other party, which might be, would you please not use your phone while I'm speaking, right? So you're keeping this whole emotion mixes up with all the other parts out and structure it in a way that the other actually also can follow and understand, because that's the whole point of doing that. It's a method that is directed at increasing empathy, understanding, and constructive behavior, because at the end of such a process, you would like to have basically a win-win outcome, right? Ideally, you would like to have that something happens based on your intent. So this is a way to really help you do that.
Yeah, it's a wonderful way to organize it so that it's not just a reaction,
Right.
it is a response.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that one.
I always experience that to be very helpful. I try to do my best to apply it as much as I can, but I'm no saint. And again and again in situations that are very emotionally heated, I catch myself also to fall back into the typical behavior of, you did this and this, it's with practice, like with everything, you get better and better at it.
Exactly. And being able to give yourself grace when you do have those moments. I think that's equally as important. As you were saying, we have to be willing to look at our growth opportunities or where we're not perfect,
Right.
because ultimately that allows us to be human too.
Yeah.
And in CEO level positions or any position within an organization, we have to be transparent and real with each other.
Yeah.
And if we set this standard of separation, and you talked about it in the beginning, these silos, right? And we create this hierarchy, and suddenly we start to feel like, no, I'm better than you because I'm perfect and my actions are, you're here and I'm here. Then there's all this segregation instead of integration. And then we don't feel like we're in it together. And that includes not being perfect.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so this you come to a very important point, Amber, and this is coming up back again to my experience that I had when I came into this organization. Again, you have this threat and fear-based leadership combined with highly siloed organizations. And in many situations, people had been completely deprived of their self-efficacy. Mm-hmm. They couldn't see the meaning and the outcome of their own contributions, and came into doing what they had to do without knowing where they are. Basically, this is like driving in the dark and at thick fog, and it can only produce high risk. Yeah, it becomes an accident and a coincidence if you produce the right outcome. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the you asked me what I did in these kind of situations, and I focused very much on helping people to re-experience their self-efficacy, to recognize really what their contributions are, and to create more corporate unity. And there are a number of ways to do that. And I just give you a few examples. So one of the things was I said to start out with is telling the truth. So sharing really with people and giving them the full story and the full unmasked truth of where the company is, why we have to change, and a vision of where we need to go. So this is one thing. And doing that on a regular basis. I had held town meetings every 4 weeks. And town meeting meant I had very widespread organizations which were distributed across the whole nation or even internationally. So some people at the headquarters where I would attend that offline physically, and the others would be virtually online. And we would present, for example, the current state of the business, the strategy, successes, or also failures that we had. And then we would open up for questions, right? And get into a constant dialogue. And it might have been just an hour to do that, but we did this on a regular basis. Another thing that I did was so-called ventures. Ventures was a method, a team-based method for solving problems. So one of the example from my last company, last turnaround situation, there was an insanely intense bureaucracy. And we set up a project that was called "What Doesn't Add Value Needs to Go." And we tendered this project into the entire organization and said, who would like to be part of that? Yeah, we're going to set up a project team, 15 people. We're not going to handpick anyone. Everyone can apply voluntarily. And then we're going to put an algorithm to work that selects people just based on anonymous and diversity-based criteria. So tenure with the company, age, gender, function in the company, etc. I just wanted to have the most diverse team, diverse 15 people that would then embark on, in this case, when we first started it, a 6 to 8 week sprint. They would dedicate 20% of their time in addition to what they, no, not in addition, we made the deal with the rest of the organization that they had to be, their time engagement had to be matched with their home organization. And they would meet every week for 1 or 2 days to work in a workshop style. The trick of that was that these teams were fully empowered and fully responsible. So from identifying the problem, coming up with ideas, coming up with developing solutions and implementing them, no one had the authority to step in. Not me as a CEO, no board member, no one. No one had to intervene with anything they came up with. We had the obligation to support them. That was it. So they were the ones who actually, for this specific project, did everything, and they were responsible for it. And this was highly successful, and we then started to cascade this down as our way of solving problems. Might it be small, might it be tactical, might it be even strategic issues in all parts of the organization. So this venture-based of problem solving. A third thing that I did, which was again extremely effective, was I made a decision that any kind of project in the organization had to be staffed cross-organizationally and multifunctionally, right? And again, whatever it might have been, might it be logistics, might it be finance, etc. We needed to bring in those different kinds, those diverse kinds of perspectives, because it creates much better solutions. It helps you really look at problems from different angles, and it helps also to produce much more solid and robust solutions because you have looked at it and developed it from different angles. And this became another rule that we used throughout the organization. And again, it came back to the organization experiencing self-efficacy, and it helped create or recreate in that case a feeling, hey, we're all in here together. We are all contributing with our different selves together on a specific solution, and no one is better than someone else, and we are all stronger as a team. And by doing that, we all of a sudden started to turning around things. You know, people started to see, hey, we can be successful. And I know what my colleague is doing. I'm not reduced to this little box that I was previously told to fill and just to optimize its efficiency. No, I'm part of the whole process, for example, that is focused on a customer. And this created purpose-driven families around certain core items or certain challenges that a customer had.
What an empowering feeling, not only creating the culture, being empowered within the organization, but understanding how that met a need in your community. Like there's just a whole flow that goes along with that then creates the financial return.
Yes.
So it isn't as though it wasn't additionally financially successful in the long run, that then creates longevity of an organization.
Yes. So, it creates longevity, it creates resilience. And again, it broke up this previous system, and that I saw as my key responsibility as a CEO, to create an environment where such a way of tackling problems, solving problems was able to thrive. So it was trust-based. It was also a failure embracing leadership. At one point, I had a CEO award out for the best failure. Not to incentivize people to screw up, I'm sorry, but to really incentivize people to share what went wrong and what did we learn from it. This is another thing that when you do that, you open up a channel for people sharing what, first of all, knowing what worked and what didn't work. And you then open up the space for dealing with failures in a constructive way because you extract the learnings, and nobody's penalized for making a mistake. But you see, again, as much as you saw conflict as a part of a normal relationship, you see failure as part of a normal process of trying to create value, right?
Yes, I love that. In our last 2 minutes here, because it goes by way too fast.
Oh,
I
it
I
does.
know, it goes by so fast. We'll make certain that everyone knows how to get a hold of your information for any mentorship type things. But along with that, if you were to give a clarion call out to other heart leaders, what would you send out? What message, as this beacon of heart leadership that you are, what would that message be?
Um, I would say be brave to embark on a constant journey of trying to bring out the best in yourself and in others. And believe in people, believe in people's potential. Don't take them for who they are, but for what they can be. And help people to find or create their purpose and to actually bring it to life. And when I think of the term heart leader, then I see someone like, do you know Professor John Keating in the Dead Poets Society? You know that movie?
Yes, it's one of my all-time favorites.
Well, this is
In my
exactly
bathroom.
what I'm talking about. This is, an individual, a leader who's opening spaces, who believes in their potential, that supports them create meaning in their lives, and on their way, it supports them on their way to become the best version of themselves, and says, make your life extraordinary. And it's all where it's all started. And I think that's the core of everything. So try to know and manage yourself the best you can, and try to help others and work towards a greater good, no matter what it is.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us, for sharing your wisdom, and for inspiring so many organizations and individuals, and inspiring me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Amber, for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us on another episode of the Heart Leader podcast, where heart and mind align. I am your host, Amber, and this month we are talking all about communication across multiple avenues of your life. Don't forget, you can get this month's resource, the Effective Communication Guidebook, over in the Heart Leader Toolbox. We'll make sure there are tons of amazing links for you to explore, including how to get a hold of Stephan, how to get a hold of that free resource, all below. So take a moment, explore down there. Until next time, I look forward to seeing you in the Suivera community.